Hello, Bill.
Good afternoon, Matt.
When's the last time we had technical problems as bad as this?
You know, for folks who don't know, you can't see what happens in the back end. We have been, this is a podcast and a dialogue. You can see us on bloggingus.tv. If you use this through podcast means you don't get to see our gorgeous faces. And we have been recording via Skype, where we actually see each other, like on the Jetsons. Back in the old days, we couldn't do that. We would just be talking on the phone and recording video on separate laptops. And we're back doing that. So I feel like I'm back in the Stone Ages, where I can't see your face anymore. It's very sad.
Yeah, it's just so weird. We do this like every week, and you would think that that would mean that you would never have to deal with any hassles, but I guess I rescheduled us today, and then who knows, like Skype does these updates, or I don't know what caused this, or but anyway.
You know, part of the problem with this show is that Big Shot Matt Lewis is on CNN all the time now, and can barely eke in 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there to talk to lowly old me, and that's why I'm a hermit, letting my beard grow to the floor, because I got nowhere to go. You probably have a whole team of beauticians making you look pretty every day.
Oh yeah,
going on Anderson Cooper and whatnot.
Hang on a second.
But
hey, Jose, back to work.
God,
look, break time is at 2. I'm sorry.
You're killing me. You're killing me.
People are writing my book next door. I got a team of these guys, and they think that just because it's the week before Christmas that they're going to get some extra days off. Look, the book doesn't write itself. You know what I'm saying?
I promise our listeners that the ghosts of Christmas past and future are not going to appear around Matt Lewis during the show. But we do have somewhat limited time. There is a lot to talk about on what may be the year-end show. I'm not sure we can get one in next week. But you just wrote a piece for the Daily Beast. Because to bring back the Metometer, I think the Metometer has been on Nixoning for a long time. It wasn't anywhere near Reaganing. But maybe you had a mixed feeling with this column. Maybe you're hardening. Harding got some stuff done. He cut taxes. He instituted some budget reforms before he died and left Teapot Dome to Calvin Coolidge. So maybe we're in a hardening phase. Is that right?
My heart is hardened, I think, which is why I'm starting to like Donald Trump better. No, look, I think that the Metometer has been all over the place this year. Probably spent the most days, if you added up the days, most days were on Nixon. But there were some good times. We had some good times this year. There were days when things were looking good, the Neil Gorsuch days, the salad days, as we fondly remember them. And I think he ends on a pretty strong note, and it's really a tale of two Trumps. I mean, on one hand, if you're a liberal and you don't like, cutting taxes or nominating, great justices, then it's going to be the whole thing's bad. But if you're a conservative, you can make a case on paper that it's been a pretty good year. I mean, things like Jerusalem, things like Gorsuch, and now tax reform here at the end of the year.
Sure, you may have an enormous blue wave crushing you a year from now, but let's savor what we have.
Yeah, and I would even say that the fact that Roy Moore lost probably helps my year-end assessment of Donald Trump for some bizarre reason, just because he's out of sight, out of mind. Although I don't think he's officially conceded, but who cares?
Well, let's compare this to Obama's first year. So Obama got the Recovery Act, which was an enormous bill that had a ton of reforms in it. It kickstarted a lot of his green energy stuff. It got some infrastructure done. It got the Making Work Pay tax credit. He had Obamacare. He had Dodd-Frank. There are some less remembered things, like he reduced crack cocaine sentencing on a practically unanimous vote. Actually, I think I'm bleeding into 2010. I'm not doing just 2009 there, so excuse me. So I'm thinking more like a year and a half. But Obamacare was just about done, and the Recovery Act was big. Now, these are things that contributed to a backlash in the November 2010 election, which was not good, but there were legacy items in that first year that we look at today, even though the mandate was taken out of Obamacare in this last tax bill, the rest of the law stays on the books. It's not like it weakens the program, but it's not actually a repeal. And the Recovery Act was a signature piece of legislation that helped turn around the Great Recession. So you could say, you know what? Sure, we lost the midterms in 2010, but that was pretty critical policy-wise and also for buffeting re-election in 2012. Do you think that Gorsuch, which is, I mean, almost every president gets a judge. It's not like it's some dramatic thing that you got a judge because there was a vacancy. I mean, yeah, McConnell did some jiu-jitsu there for you to get it, but...
And in the first year, too. I mean, to get one in the first year.
But that's just timing. That's not special skill.
Yeah, but it suggests that you may get another or more. I mean,
sure. You know, but Obama, I forget exactly when Obama got Kagan. Obama got Kagan and Sotomayor pretty early. That's not crazy.
But he's also set a record for these, federal circuit court.
This record is because most other presidents had slower paces on lower-level judges because there was a 60-vote threshold, and you had to do a fair amount of, particularly with Obama, because the judicial boards have gotten so pointed, you got to do excessive vetting to make sure you don't have enormous embarrassments like Trump just had with a guy who didn't know the basics of law. Now the bar is lower, and because Democrats changed the threshold in the second term of Obama, which allowed him to get a bevy of judges in his second term. And now Republicans are crowing, ha ha, you changed the rule, now we get to do whatever we want. But that pendulum's going to swing for every president now. That's not special.
I'm sensing some defensiveness here.
It's not defensiveness. It's just ridiculous to say this is not because Trump had an awesome year. It's because there's a rule change that's going to change judicial politics forever for every president every time the pendulum swings. That's nothing unique to Trump. And well, so now you have.
But I mean, just to push back a little bit, Trump could have picked his sister to put her on the Supreme Court, or he could have picked,
He did pick a couple total yahoos, which are getting him in trouble. Maybe they will learn. They're learning that, you know what, just because you have a lower threshold, you still have to do some basic vetting, or you're going to get screwed. A guy like John Kennedy's going to show up and say, no, I'm not going to cast my vote for a total embarrassment that's going to carry around with me for the rest of my political career.
I'm just saying from a conservative perspective, like if you were a conservative and you've made this deal with the devil, you would at least hope that the deal pays off,
The conservatives got their deal. I agree with that.
I agree with that. Supreme Court. He could have picked, anybody, and he picked Neil Gorsuch.
I agree that Trump has not betrayed conservatives on that pledge. So let's shift to taxes now. Okay. I saw Paul Ryan is doing, the greatest victory lap of victory laps. He has a video out where you see a baby-faced Paul Ryan, 1998, talking about tax reform, and the title of the video is what's that?
What a head of hair too.
Yeah, the video is titled "A Moment Decades in the Making." Basically, Paul Ryan has sweated and toiled for 20 years for this tax reform. He has the gift where he's banging the gavel so hard it falls off the desk. Oh, glory be to Paul Ryan! Now he can retire. There's some speculation in Politico that he's going to retire soon. He has done this.
That no House Speaker will retire unless it's predicted here first. On this show,
True enough. So, how glorious is this tax reform from the conservative perspective? So, it has a big corporate tax cut, but there are other elements of it where even some corporations are saying, I might not get a tax cut out of this. Maybe most of them will, but it's not going to be across the board because there's other quirks that have been done. It's not simplified. There's still plenty of loopholes. In fact, this has been so hastily written that a lot of tax experts think there's going to be grand opportunities for gaming the code, particularly with this pass-through provision, because a lot of businesses might say, oh, I'm going to be a pass-through now, even though I wasn't before, and try to get that 20% tax deduction. You did not lower the number of brackets. It's still 7 brackets. They're still talking as if it's simplified and you can do it on a postcard, and you can't. This is in no way tax simplification. I think Democrats are overstating the case because they're pointing to the fact that the individual tax cuts expire in 2025, which nobody cares about in 2018. So there's a risk
for
the Democrats.
But I see it as an opportunity, not a problem. I mean, I think
for who?
For Republicans.
Yeah. I mean,
they expire as an opportunity, not a problem.
Well, it's a problem insofar as I mean, look, I think it's so far down the road that's meaningless. This tax is going to try change 2 or 3 more times before you even get to 2025.
I'm just saying politically, I don't think they're acting as if there's a downside.
Well, it depends who's in charge then. The Bush tax cuts were for 10 years, and guess who was in charge for 10 years? It was Barack Obama, and they mostly went away. So it just depends who's in charge. I think it does expose, the Republican argument is, oh, that's just a little gimmick. We'll extend those cuts when we get there. We're going to do that. Well, by saying that, you're admitting you don't care at all about the debt. You say you do, and you don't. That's there so you can stay within the confines of budget reconciliation, limit your deficit addition to $1.5 trillion over 10 years. If you're saying, oh, that's going to go away after that, well, guess what? That debt balloon's going to be even bigger because you're admitting you don't care. But again, that's me venting. I don't think that's going to be critical as far as 2018 is concerned.
You seem to be. This is why. This is part of the reason why I think that my assessment of ending on a high note for Republicans is correct, because I sense some animosity.
No.
From Northern DMZ.
I do not think it is a given that the bill is a boon to Republicans in 2018. I think there's a risk of Democrats overstating the case and helping Republicans. But I do think that there is enough complexity in this bill, enough overselling on the Republican side, where people may look. I mean, look, by 2018, you will have not filled out your 2018 return yet. That's in April 2019. The Republican argument is, oh, well, we're going to tweak the withholding soon, and you're going to see it in your paycheck. Well, that was the Obama thought in 2009 with the Making Work Pay tax credit. And there are behavioral economics that the Obama people cited, which, this is better for the economy. There'll be more of a boost in consumer spending for this subtle increase in your weekly paycheck than you do with the Bush-style, here's a $300 check approach, where people tend to treat it as a sacred gift and they squirrel it away. They don't run out and spend it. I mean, that was the theory, and arguably the theory worked because we did get out of the recession, but Obama certainly did not get any political dividend because people didn't see the benefit as clearly as they did when they got a paycheck. So I think Republicans are somewhat kidding themselves if they think that's going to be a big boon.
But I would say though the problem with that is nobody thinks they're getting a tax cut. So
right, that's the Democrats' fault that they've overshot the argument. I agree with that. The Tax Policy Center says in 2018, 132 million people get some sort of tax cut and 10 million do not. So in one sense, that's many more getting a tax cut that don't. But if you're one of those 10 million, you're going to be pretty pissed off. And those people might have louder voices than some of the others, number one. And number two, that tax cut might not be that big, and Democrats can overstate that and treat a small tax cut as being unimportant. But if other costs go up, if prices go up, if healthcare costs go up because you yanked out the mandate and premiums go up, if this infrastructure bill passes, which I doubt, quite frankly, but if it did, part of that bill is to encourage states and cities to increase their local taxes to qualify for federal funding. If the net of the average person is, this didn't really make me very much money, if any at all, then voters are not going to judge the tax bill in a vacuum. They're going to judge what is my overall cost of living and how has it been impacted by the entirety of the Trump agenda. There is no guarantee that's going to be a net positive for folks by 2018.
All right. Well, I think that's fair.
But
I think it's fair. But I would just also say, I mean, part of the knock on Trump has not been whether or not he was implementing good or bad policy, but just that he couldn't get anything done. That none of his major, legislative attempts were working, and he did get this when he gets it right at the buzzer, essentially, as the fourth quarter expires.
Well, this probably happened because he stayed out of it for once. He shut his mouth for the most part and let Congress figure it out. It's classic leading from behind, which often works. So I give Trump credit to that respect. Okay, I want to go to my initial point. From a conservative perspective, how much of a legacy item is this tax bill? Is this really all that conservative? I'm not saying it's liberal, but you think about what conservatives really want out of a tax code. Do you think this is, one, good enough, and two, durable enough that's going to stand the test of time, and you can look back at it 20 years from now and say, man, thank God Trump, Ryan McConnell did that 2017 tax cut. Man, that really changed everything. What do you think the odds are of that?
Well, I mean, I don't know that anyone does that. Very rare, it's a very rare piece of legislation that people, landmark, the Civil Rights Act or something, that people look back that fondly of. And we talk about like Reagan's tax cuts in 81 and 86, but I don't know if anyone has any celebrations about them or anything. So I think this is significant. Basically, the corporate, lowering the corporate tax rate that's the big deal here. That was the last sort of piece of the puzzle in terms of taxes. And so I just think it's like the French Revolution. It's too soon to tell. That's a big. I mean, I know your point. Your point has always been get that done. Let's see if it works. This is the conservative belief that lowering corporate taxes is good for the economy. So you might as well try it. It's a hell of a bet to take, especially when, Obama made his bets at the nadir of the economy. And, conservatives can kvetch and say, oh, well, the economy got better. Well, you came in on the dip, so that doesn't mean what you did was so great. Maybe you just lucked out. Maybe. Now, conservatives are coming in off of 3% GDP growth, where things are kind of humming along relatively well. If you hit a dip now, you might try to say, well, you can't blame the taxes for that. It's a cycle, business cycle. But George Bush had his tax cuts. They weren't the corporate tax cut. It was individual tax cuts. And the end of that was the biggest global economic calamity since the Great Depression. And it didn't look so good. So if I was a conservative, I would worry that this was being tested perhaps at the wrong time. Look, I think winning is losing and losing is winning in politics. And sometimes it's like, be careful. Any victory sows the seeds of the next defeat, and the backlash and the blaming, and whether it's Obamacare. You go ask Democrats, if you passed Obamacare and then you end up losing all these elections, like, was it worth it? Well, I think you'd probably say it was. Look, I think that I don't know if there's ever a good time to do anything. If the economy was bad and Republicans were doing this, that you would say, like, how can they possibly? I would understand if the economy were good. But right now, people are out of work and people are struggling. And what do Republicans do? Tax breaks for the rich. How out of touch could you be? So, I mean, come on. I don't know if you're ever going to have a good time to appease people who just frankly, maybe even, justifiably just happen to disagree on policy with you.
So if I can shift gears to another topic, I had a piece in Politico this week, which, quite frankly, I wasn't expecting to get a strong reaction from.
Your pieces are always now sort of taking off, man. So
I mean, this wasn't as good as Chelsea Clinton for Senate. I mean, that was my all-time best for the year. So this was
Donald Trump's not the only guy that finishes strong, Bill. You're doing it over at Politico magazine too. Lots of winning this year.
Thank you. So the article was the case for a generic Democrat in 2020, looking at mostly Doug Jones, a little bit of Ralph Northam, but Doug Jones. All the talk amongst Democrats this year has been, should you go harder left, or do you go to the center? Do you double down on economic populism, or do you shift towards economic populism, or do you double down on identity politics? Is it getting out that multicultural base? Is it going for the white working class? And Doug Jones really bypassed all of that. I mean, he didn't have any signature ideas. He spoke in Democratic talking point platitudes. He didn't swerve left and do a hardcore Bernie-esque populism. He didn't swerve right on abortion and guns. He just did kind of the standard Democratic thing in a genial, pleasant, inoffensive package, and let the harsh spotlight fall on Roy Moore. And the argument from a lot of folks is, well, you Democrats shouldn't do that. You can't assume that people are going to turn out for you just because of the problems of your opponent. Well, that's exactly what happened with Doug Jones and Roy Moore. And there's some people that have assumed, Jones got this big African American turnout because he has this great story about how he convicted 2 Ku Klux Klansmen for the 1963 Birmingham church bombing. But the Washington Post surveyed black voters online in Alabama, and that's not what they got back. They said, this Doug Jones guy didn't reach out for a vote. He's too milquetoast. He's pandering to the white conservatives. But we're here to stop Roy Moore. Exactly what they were saying. But at the same time, that Democratic turnout was pretty good. It was almost as good as what Hillary got in a presidential year. But the Republican turnout collapsed. So my point was, sure, being the inspirational, bold candidate is potentially good for turning out your base, but there's also that downside risk of turning out the other guy's base because they're scared about what you're up to. In Alabama, Republicans decided, I really hate Roy Moore, and I don't love Doug Jones, but I'm not so terrified by Doug Jones that I have to get out of my house to stop him. I'm going to stay home.
Yeah, what is it? Vanilla sells more ice cream. Is it the most popular ice cream flavor?
Right,
right.
Vanilla, probably. So I
think there's a Spinal Tap joke in there, right? Wasn't the one guy from Spinal Tap that was like, Nigel is like hot and he's fiery hot, and then I forget the other guy's name is like ice cold, and me, I'm just sort of room temperature or something like that.
Right.
It's like that's what people want.
Right. So I'm not arguing that the generic Dem is what you want in every race every time. But if you're trying to beat Donald Trump, and Trump is, I think, akin to more in that he's got this rabid base, but all the data shows that it doesn't really go beyond that. I mean, he won with fewer votes the first time round, and his support has dropped about 10 points since then. So the fear is that you might put somebody up that a soft previous Trump voter who's sort of soured on him might say, I really am not the big fan of Trump, but I just can't do what the Democrats put up. Oh, it's so distasteful. I can't do it. Someone who's inoffensive avoids that problem. And so that if you have that mentality, that opens up the field to other candidates like a Tim Kaine, Gary Peters from Michigan, who no one talks about, but he won against the Republican title in 2014. Amy Klobuchar, of all the women, she's the most generic of all those folks. And what I've gotten this negative reaction from the left is people assuming when I say generic, I mean centrist, and I don't. And I said that in the piece quite explicitly. Jeff Merkley is more of a generic Democrat than Bernie Sanders, but they have the basically the same agenda. It's just Jeff Merkley is in a more vanilla package.
Ask yourself this question: would a generic Democrat have beat Donald Trump last time?
I mean, I think last time I wrote this before that backlash against Obama was so strong that perhaps nobody could have beaten Trump. That 46% concentrated in those electoral majority states might have come out no matter who you put up. But we're not. The assumption here is that we're not dealing with a Trump that is going to get 46%. We're dealing with a Trump that's more likely going to get 35% based on, or 40% based on current polling, and he's not the rapscallion outsider. He's the incumbent that you've suffered for 4 years and you actively dislike. That's a different kind of scenario, and that argues for more of a don't F this up candidate than you need to go big candidate. Now, I'm not saying a go big candidate can't win against Trump. I'm saying the evidence of 2017 where Ralph Northam and Doug Jones won statewide races that some people thought they weren't going to win because they were so milquetoast. Northam won going away. He did better than Hillary in 2016. He did better than Terry McAuliffe in 2013. Rob Quist in Montana, who was a Bernie-crat, did better than Hillary, but did worse than Governor Steve Bullock, who is still governor of Montana, who ran when Hillary was on the ticket in 2016. This is the state that elects Democrats, elected Bullock, elected John Tester. And here's a guy who ran as a Bernie-crat, said, this prairie populism is the way to win in states like Montana. It wasn't. So that doesn't mean that this one race condemns populism forever.
As a boring dude, I wholeheartedly get behind this theory. I really think
you could vote for a generic Dem. You think? Well, abortion still might hang you up.
No, I just think I wouldn't vote for him, but I probably wouldn't vote. But no, but I think that you're onto something here. It's counterintuitive. Everybody wants exciting, and honestly, we are in an era now where you kind of have to be. If you look at the last several presidents, they're sort of rock stars and celebrities. But there is always the backlash. We go for the opposite, and I just don't know that you can outflash Donald Trump anyway. So maybe just kind of flying below the radar might be a better strategy.
Which is exactly what Jones did. I mean, more so than Northam. I mean, this is where I think a fairer critique of my piece, which what I get from the left is just. You're an idiot. You don't know politics. You need to inspire people, and you don't inspire people, you lose, and that's the end of the story. And there are plenty of people who inspire some folks. George McGovern inspired some folks, but he inspired a lot of other folks to not vote for him. So it's not like any of these things is always true in every circumstance.
Yeah, this is the cliche, right? So on the Republican side, it's bold colors and no pastels, and on the left, it's you can't win by just being against the other guy. You have to have an inspiring message. Well, who says? Like,
right.
That's true a lot. But
Reagan was bold, and Trump was bolder than Romney or McCain. But Barry Goldwater got his head handed to him. So I mean, there's a lot of factors here. I do think there is a fair critique in that you might be a generic today. You might not look very generic by the end of the race. Mike Dukakis was very pleasantly generic in July of 1988. He didn't look very generic by November. It takes skill to maintain your genericness in the hot box of a presidential campaign, especially against a guy like Donald Trump who's going to be poking at you all the way through. So I don't think it's a simple
this is actually
ask.
An interesting thing. There are people who get caught up in scandals because they're eccentric and interesting. And people want to write about them and talk about them. Being boring and is probably underrated and flying under the radar. And there are people who get ahead in business by virtue of keeping a low profile and of just sort of blending in. So, yeah, it's an interesting thing. I think in our celebrity culture and our social media culture, we really... lionize this thing about being interesting and compelling, and sometimes like that will get you in trouble. There are times that gets you in trouble, being too quotable or interesting or whatever.
I mean, obviously that wasn't Trump's problem. Trump was able to do that and get away with it, but not everybody gets away with that. It's going to be. It's going to be hard for a Democrat to win on that in the primary because it's so crowded. And calling attention to yourself is going to be necessary to break out of the pack. So it would require a real mass agreement amongst the Democratic voters, to really want that generic candidate. I'm not predicting that's going to happen.
You know who we need now more than ever? Calvin Coolidge. Silent.
Harding was as I cited in the piece. Harding had the "Back to Normal" campaign. That was his slogan, "Back to Normal." After the upheaval of Woodrow Wilson, and then Harding had the biggest popular vote margin, winning margin in history to this day.
This is a return to normalcy.
That's right. That's right. Anyway, I've got a few minutes left, and I know you want to talk about what's roiling the right this week, which is the spat between Charles Cooke of the National Review and Jennifer Rubin of the Washington Post.
Yeah. Well, first I just wanted to get your take, see what you think about it.
It's hard for me to have a dog in this fight, quite frankly.
Well, that's why I want your take on it. You're dispassionate.
I think so. Jennifer Rubin was or is a conservative opinion writer and blogger at the Washington Post. She was, people on the left treated her like a Republican hack who wasn't really providing thoughtful analysis, just doing partisan talking points. And then she became a never Trumper, and now she's being similarly vicious towards Trump. And Charles C.W. Cooke, is that the full name, correct, for National Review?
He's from across the pond. I'm not sure we can really trust him yet.
And Cooke is not a hardcore Trump guy, but he...
That's the interesting thing, is that this is like center-right people like me versus the hardcore never Trumpers like Rubin and Frum.
So you and Cooke are like you and Cooke are in your own camp, right?
Yeah,
you're anti-Trump but not never Trump.
I hardly ever know him, but I think that nobody in this fight is a Trump fan. This is like a disagreement between people like me who try to sort of call him as I see him, and I haven't abandoned conservatism, versus people who are now just reflexively against anything that Trump is for.
And so Cooke's argument is that Cooke is saying I'm a case by case guy, and Rubin has now abandoned her past conservatism just to attack Trump mercilessly, like the hack that she is. And he cites some examples. The one that comes to mind is his move on Jerusalem. Before Rubin was praising Republicans that said they were going to move the embassy to Jerusalem, and now she's mocking Trump for doing this in this ham-fisted way that's going to upset stability in the Middle East. And I'm not a big Jennifer Rubin fan. I have never thought she was. I think she always had been writing more as a partisan and less as an objective analyst. I'd only pause to say I don't know if there's any actual change in her outlook right now. I mean, maybe she's actually modified her view on certain things, seeing how Trump has behaved. If there's some actual genuine movement there, maybe it's not quite fair just to cherry pick lines from before and lines from right now. I mean, if you're going to move, you should say why you moved. But that could be the case.
She's always. So I would just say a few things. Like, one, I'd love to know like the real origin story of her. I really don't know where she came from. I've talked to people like Jim Antle, who was like got pitches from her back in the mid 2000s from the American Spectator, who just feels like she came out of nowhere. They started publishing her, but like he thought she was this young up and coming writer. I'd never met her, and like she had been like some sort of a labor attorney in California. Apparently, had been like a John Kerry supporter or fairly liberal, and it just seems like her writing is. She decides that she is going to support a candidate or oppose a candidate. And then all the things that she writes are reverse engineered and filtered through that activist objective. But then once she decides to like a different candidate, all of her attitudes and opinions and policy preferences shift in accordance with what helps or hurts the candidate that she's supporting or opposing at a given time. And I think Charles Cooke did a pretty good job of documenting that. But the weird thing is that she is ostensibly the conservative writer at the Washington Post, or blogger at the Washington Post.
They have others. They have Mark Thiessen, right? They have.
But her blog is like literally called like Right
Turn. Yeah, she's a conservative blogger. But they have Michael Gerson, the former Bush speechwriter, Mark Thiessen, the Bush administration. They still have George Will.
I guess here's my point, though. Okay, so like, look, far be it from me to, like, I would never say like you have to be like a dogmatic Republican or conservative. I mean, I'm contrarian. I attack Republicans. I've written a whole book attacking Republicans. Like, I'm totally fine with that, and I'm not completely orthodox either. But like, and I don't even know where she stands on all of the issues I'm about to say. But I would just say like this, like. If in the past like month you don't like where Republicans are at on net neutrality, you don't like where Republicans are at and have been on Jerusalem, you don't support tax cuts. I mean, like, I don't want to. Again, I'm not into like excommunicating people from a movement, but it's like at some point, can you be the token Republican or the token conservative if you don't support long-standing conservative policy? Like,
well, do you think? I don't read her. I mean, I haven't read her in years because I've never found her as a value-added analyst. So I mean, there's that choice. You just not read that person if you don't like her work. But when she's making these points that on the surface are not conservative, do you think she's using conservative argumentation at least, and coming up to a different conclusion, or do you think maybe she's just not being if she's just not a conservative anymore? I mean, you can still have a job in punditry. Maybe just title your blog differently if that's the case, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I would say I just listened to Dresner and Wright here at Blogging Heads. It's a niche show for those who don't know. Less ratings than the DMZ, but sort of a niche audience show that also runs here on our network. And they were making this. You know, I just think there's an interesting, like, put Jennifer Rubin aside. I think there's a really interesting phenomenon happening right now where you have people like, and they were talking about neocons, but there is some overlap. I don't think that's exclusive to this group, but there are folks, including Rubin, who seem to have let Donald Trump. They're so anti-Trump that they can't support anything, even if it's conservative, even if it's a long-standing conservative policy objective. And then there are people like me and a whole bunch of people. I would say like Jonah Goldberg is in this camp, and just there's a lot of, you know, people who are in this camp who are not fans of Donald Trump, but just try to be intellectually honest. You know, it's like that's why I've never been down with with entirely being called a never Trumper or the resistance, because I just think, like, as an intellectually honest, you know, commentator or writer, you should call them like you see them, and when Trump does something good, you should say that, and when he does something bad, you should say that. But if you believe that he is Hitler, then you can't say, well, you know what, though, he did make the trains run on time. You really can't give him credit for anything, because then you're aiding and abetting like a mortal enemy. So anyway, I think it's an interesting phenomenon, and partly it's interesting because none of the people I'm talking about involved in this internecine, you know, squabble on the internets, it doesn't include any Trump fans.
Why can't every Trumpers just get along? Why can't you all go have some coffee together, maybe break some bread, maybe all come out on the same page?
Well, I don't even know. I think I don't know what we call ourselves. Like, I think they have now. There's a piece in an Esquire by, what is it, Tannenhouse? What's that guy's name?
I haven't seen it.
Anyway, it literally begins at a Georgetown cocktail party. this column. And it's like the David Frums and the Jennifer Rubins and the Max Boots, and I guess Ross Douthat somehow got mixed up in that, but I don't think it's fair to put him in the same camp as them. But anyway, where was I going with this?
Whatever it is, you got to wrap it up because I have to go.
Oh, well, then let's just do that.
Okay.
Let's just call it a day. Not my best appearance, I'm going to say.
I disagree. I thought you were. I'm sure you gave your best stuff to Anderson, as you always do, but you left a little bit for the masses here. We appreciate that.
Well, let's just hope 2018. I perform better in 2018 than I have in 2017. That's all I can.
Well, let's be thankful we have survived 2017. It was a tough year for all of us, quasi-different Trumpers like yourself and Democrats like myself, but we managed to persevere.
And that's what I was going to say, by the way. What do we call ourselves? I don't know.
The two of us? Or your,
the never Trumpers who support conservative policy when Trump has his name attached.
That's your holiday assignment. Come back to me in 2018 with a brand.
That's a column.
With a marketing label.
That's a column. Follow us on Twitter at DMZ Show. Read Bill at Politico Magazine. What's your podcast called?
This is not normal. We haven't done one in a couple weeks, but if you want, you go to liberaloasis.com, You can see the catalog there. I should have one more Politico piece for the year is out, so keep an eye out on Politico.com/magazine.
All right, Bill has to go pick up his kids.
Yeah.
I have to go get my team back to work on this book. I think they're slacking off right now. I heard some talking, so I'm going to go crack the whip. We'll see you guys, I don't know, next year, soon.
Next year.
Sometime in the DMZ.
See you,
buddy. Merry Christmas.